Okay. Um, my name is Gwen Howes, and I'm a volunteer with SCORE, and I'm here to introduce our presenter, Dina Davis. But first, a brief commercial about SCORE. So, what is SCORE? Well, the main thing to know about SCORE is that we are the largest network of free volunteers in the nation. And a very key fact about people who receive SCORE mentoring, and this is from information from the Small Business Administration. They say small businesses who receive 3 hours or more of mentoring help report higher revenues and increase business growth. Uh, our mission is to foster vibrant small business communities through mentoring and education. So we have a network of volunteers across the country who are knowledgeable. Many are retired executives. And we also have people who are currently in the workforce, but they all bring along skills that are helpful to our clients in growing their businesses or getting their businesses off the ground. A very important part of our operation is that we follow a code of ethics. And the three main parts of that code of ethics are that we're not allowed to make any money from our SCORE clients. Um,
Gwen, are
we,
you reading your slides? There's nothing on the screen's not advancing.
okay, it's
Okay.
not advancing.
Yeah.
I'll stop sharing and start sharing again, see if that will help. There's always going to be a glitch.
Yeah. It's Chinese New Year.
Okay, let's see here. Okay, are you seeing?
Yep.
Okay,
There you go.
and I was left off on our code of ethics, uh, along with not being able to uh, take or make any money from our clients' success. We Anything that is shared by our clients, any information shared is confidential and protected by the U.S. government. Okay. Uh, we are able to deliver our mentoring work at no charge because of our work with the Small Business Administration. And we also have a few generous sponsors who I'm just going to show you on this slide. This is our sponsors in the Cleveland area that allow us to provide the services that we do to our clients. And finally, this is the last slide of my commercial. This QR code allows you to access our website, score.org, and at the site you can find a mentor. It's a very easy process. You just enter your zip code, or if you would like, you feel you would be able to bring something to our clients, you can sign up to become a volunteer. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn this over to our presenter, Dina Davis, who will introduce herself.
Sounds great. Thank you, Gwen.
Okay.
All right, I'll take the baton here. If you could check my screen for me. We good?
Okay. Let's see here. Yep, looks beautiful.
Okay, perfect. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Dina Davis. I will be your facilitator tonight. And the topic, this is something I do all day, every day, believe it or not, and have for the last 20 plus years. It's this thing that we oftentimes don't know what happens in the company, but we see the results of it. So that's human resources. So that's what we're here today. The topic I have here is HR for small business, which is also capitalized ALL, because all businesses utilize HR. And my purpose today is to show you how that works and how that breaks down for you, regardless of what stage of the business that you're in. I will keep us going here. All right. So where's my slides here? Sorry. Technology. Okay, there we go. Okay. All right. There we go. Yep. So again, my name's Dina Davis. I have been in human resources now, like I said, for about 20 plus years. So I've seen the gamut in terms of things that happen in an HR function. I've had all the, I call it, I've gone through all the pandemics of the world, everything from H1N1 to COVID to bird flu, all the things you probably forgot about if you've been working for quite some time. But I've been through all of those. In addition to that, I've also worked with a lot of small businesses. I pivoted out of my corporate career about 5 years ago, and now I work exclusively with small to mid-sized businesses on helping them build out their HR functions. And so, one of the things when we think about you as a business owner, when we get into this topic, I want you to put on your business owner hat, right? Because as a business owner, the things that I talk to you about in human resources, the way that you're engaged in those decisions is very different than what it looks like for you being an employee on the recipient of HR services. So, as we go through here, again, my attempt to do is to bring you into some of that decision making process and help you understand how all this comes together to really help accelerate and support your business. And so, as a business owner, especially if you're in the early stages and you're taking on a lot of responsibilities, you haven't quite grown to delegate some of those off, or maybe you have. And I think that's a great accomplishment if you have. But for some of us, we're still in that upstart part of our business where we're taking on a lot of hats. So for me as a business owner, a small business owner, everything is on my mind pretty much every day because, again, there's a fair amount of the different areas of the business that I'm still supporting. And I'm getting to the point, actually having been, again, a little bit more than 5 years. And I do have different partners in other areas. So, for example, like accountants have marketing, right? Like, so I do have partners that I work with, but we all get to that point where we need to really think about what hat do we wear as a business owner and what is the best use of my time. And I think about one example, a friend of mine, she's a principal at a high school. Not actually, it's not a high school. It's a elementary school. So she's a principal at a school, and we were talking about human resources, and I was just telling her about all the different things that we were going through, and she was like, that is one area where I always recommend people to make sure that they have a good partner on their side, because there's so many different things that you have to navigate. And then not only that, they change frequently. And so it's one of those areas where I tell folks that you certainly want to learn along the way. We can certainly help teach you and guide you, but please don't try to figure it out on your own. There's a lot of us that work fractional. We work project related. So again, there's different ways to work us into your budget, of course, but making sure you have the right partnership is really key here. So let's talk about human resources. What is it? And let's, again, I'm giving you that lens as a business owner here. So when you think about human resources as a business owner, one thing I want you to think about is HR is a function of your business. Okay. And you'll hear me say this often through the presentation. I say HR is a function, not a person. Okay. Now I am a person. I have, experience in all these areas here. And there are many others like me, of course, as well. But don't think of it as Dina is HR. Think of it as HR is the part of my business that helps us to stay compliant, and it helps us to make sure that we have what's needed for an employee at every stage of the life cycle. And so, what we mean by that in our world, the employee life cycle is every way that we touch an employee. And so, for you, that's basically through the entire time that that employee is with you, HR has some sort of interaction with them or touch point. So, we do everything from helping to shape and to maintain organizational culture, structures of jobs, compensation, benefit plans, onboarding, training development. And when we put this into our life cycle, pretty much again, anything that the employee is going to encounter, HR has some sort of influence on. And I say influence because, again, we can give recommendations, and we partner internally with all of you to make sure that what we're implementing fits the tenor and the tone of that business. And so, again, one thing to remember here out of this slide is HR is different every place you go. So, what I mean by that is we do a lot of the same things. Like, again, we're going to hire, we're going to onboard, we're going to have performance reviews. There's going to be a cycle of things that typically happen. And again, depending on where you're at in the phase of your business, depends on how much of this life cycle you're utilizing at this point. But my point is, we're going to be in every single area there. But when we first get started, you're going to probably have some areas that are heavier. Like, for instance, when you're earlier stage, you're probably not going to do a whole lot around learning and development, right? Like, that might not be a hot topic for you until you start to grow and to start to build out your team. But, again, what's important out of this is it's a function of your business that helps you stay compliant and helps you. And I say it this way, I say it helps you to manage, the people resources of your business. And that management comes through the different parts of the life cycle. Okay. Now, another area of human resources that you'll hear us talk a lot about is called compliance, right? So, at the heart of human resources is compliance, and that's basically navigating all of the different laws and regulations that are out there that we have to comply with. So, that just on the surface, when you're talking about federal regulations, there's something like over 180 federal regulations that HR has to navigate. Then you have to layer on top of that, you have state regulations. You may even have something from the city, from the county. You may have industry specific items that come up, like if you're a federal manufacturer and you have ITAR, right? Like, so there's all these different things that come and intersect with us in the workplace. And that's why I say that you don't want to, unless you want to become HR, and hey, there's room for all of us here, but unless you want to become an HR professional, make sure you have a good HR person and make sure you also have a good attorney. And I'll tell you how those things work in conjunction. But again, we help you to make sure that the decisions that we're making mitigate those risks and or put us into compliance. So a lot of times, again, it's just making sure we're following the rules. It's just the simple way of saying it. Now, compliance is foundational to HR, but it's not the destination, meaning you don't, to me, laws are there to give you guidance and they're there to help you to set an expectation or a standard, but it's not the as far as you can go. You can always go and be more generous than what the law requires. And, there's also other ways where, again, you have interpretation that helps you to navigate those waters. So it's not most times, honestly, it's not as black and white as we think. It's mostly gray. So get used to navigating a fair amount of gray space, and it's okay. Meaning we have to deduct through these discussions to really make sure that we're doing the right thing, that we are compliant, and then whatever we come up with also fits the needs of the organization that we're working in, and it feels good. Like I have some companies, they're very I don't want to call it slow. They're more of a thoughtful, I'll say, in their approach, and they roll things out, and it takes a really long time in some cases to do that, but they're willing to take that extra time because they want everyone to really feel comfortable along the way. They lean a little bit more towards consensus. That's that organization. That's what works for them. I have other organizations where they're like, how fast can you pull the band-aid off? Right? Like you just got to suck it up and keep it rolling. Right? So every business is different. Your business is also very different. So don't be alarmed if and when we engage in deeper conversations to get your input, because a lot of times what we want to do is make sure, again, whatever we're shaping fits you and your business. So again, we might use the same ingredients, but the way we put them together inside of every company and every business we work with is very different. So there is no quote unquote HR cookie cutter that I can go and just take off the shelf and plug you in an HR department, right? It doesn't quite work that way. I have to take the ingredients and then I have to customize them to your organization depending on what we need to comply with and how you want to run your business. Now, with that, I do recommend that and regardless of where you are, even if you haven't hired yet, establish some of your core practices early to mitigate risk. So I'll give you an example. I have a client, I love them, they're wonderful. And I've been kind of getting on them about their handbook. And they're like, oh, well, we're going to push that off to Q4. And, so in a way, they're kind of prioritizing the handbook as a later project. What I'm trying to explain to them and what I have eventually became successful is we need a foundation for making certain core decisions. That's how you mitigate risk. Is we say, hey, here's how here's how often we're going to pay, right? Like here's who's eligible for benefits. Here's how we want to handle timekeeping. Like again, there's probably about 5 or 10 different policies that you want to have out the gate, whether you have the whole handbook out the gate or not, but that's okay. You want to at least make sure you have those core policies in place because, again, that's going to be your point of reference for making decisions. So I'll give you a quick example with my client that actually happened recently. In your handbook, one of the things that I help to create are inclement weather policies. So if we have to shut down the plant for inclement weather, which we recently had to do, which is not a usual thing, but we recently had to do that. I think most of us might have in Ohio, we know, right? You know. And so we had to shut the plant down. But in that, there were questions like, oh, am I going to get paid? What am I going to do? Can I work from home? Can you work from home? Like it was all this kind of scuttlebutt with this particular client trying to figure this out on the fly. And so, am I going to help them create the policy? Absolutely. But if you would have taken my guidance, we would have already had this policy thought through, and we would have already been able to just take it off the shelf and say, oh, okay, here's what we do in these situations. And I just use that as an example, again, out of love, because I absolutely love this client. But it's one of those things where you want to make sure you have at least some foundation in, regardless if you hire or not, or how many people you hire. So don't punt that off until later. And I can take 5 or 10 policies or so, create that foundation, and then build on the handbook pieces over time, because there are certain things you may or may not need as much of when you get started. So again, that's where all the customization comes in, but don't forgo that early stage, right? And that's why I say the last bullet there is it allows us to assess risk on a case by case basis. So if we say, oh, well, if I do this for this employee, well, they feel like I discriminated against them because I didn't do it for the other employee. Well, if you have your policy and you show how you're making those decisions, then that automatically, it's covering you, because you've already thought that through. So you're not making that decision because of that person. You're making the decision based on an objective set of criteria outside of people. And that's, again, helps you to mitigate risk. So I won't go too much into that, but main thing there is make sure you have some foundation. All right. Now, another piece to this is the Department of Labor. And so the Department of Labor is our, I guess, but it's like the grand poobah, right? Like for HR people. And I don't know if there's a better word. If you have one, throw one in the chat. But I say that just because what we do is so much is governed by the Department of Labor. So there's of course the federal statutes, and that's what I talked about over here. We have got about 180 of those or more that you have to navigate through. Now, each state, and so this is important for all of us as well, is each state has its own Department of Labor. And so I have some resources for you at the end to show you how to navigate that. But if you just go to the Department of Labor, you can easily get to your state, and it will show you if there's anything state specific. And again, it will also help you to navigate the federal compliance. Or you could just hire an HR person to do that for you, and make sure that you're doing things in the spirit and the letter of the law. Right. Okay. All right. So again, HR is a function, not a person. And so I want to show you, and this is a model that I like to share. And this is an illustration to give you some idea of how HR is broken down. Because again, a lot of times, unless you've been in leadership roles in a company that you worked with, you probably experienced HR again as an employee. So you see the handbook and you see the things that come out from the long list of decisions and information we need to consider. You see the output as an employee. As a business owner, you're going to see all those inputs. You're going to be in those conversations. You're going to be looking at the data. It's all those things are coming to you, which is, again, why I'm also encouraging you to think about how far and how much of this do you want to manage, because there is going to be a point, and probably very quickly, that you might either lose interest or the capacity starts to pick up. So at the bottom of our pyramid here is our compliance that I talked about. Again, those are all the legal requirements that we have to navigate. And that is at the foundation of HR. And that's actually why HR even became a function in the business. It grew. It used to be called personnel way, way, way back in the day. And it really started to make sure that you have the compliance, because there were a lot of things like paperwork and things that you had to have. And again, it was tied towards adhering to the laws and so forth. Now, you go from HR compliance, and again, this is just, again, more of an illustration of how HR functions. It's not a hierarchy in terms of the people or even salaries or anything like that. So it has nothing to do with that. It's just purely to illustrate to you, on a volume perspective, what might you see more often than not. So the other piece to this is the HR admin. HR admin is where most people think of HR, because that's where they see it. That's where again, that's all our tracking, our handbooks, our employee resources. That's us keeping track of their time. That's us having a system where we have the employees' information and their salary information in it, right? So we call that an HRIS, human resources information system, right? So most of us have interacted or seen the results of HR admin quite a bit. Now, those are the two fundamentals. When I say the core and you want to have the foundation, those are interchangeable words in my vocabulary, but you want to make sure you have those as your fundamentals because that's where you're going to mitigate your risk. And that's also, again, making sure that you have the baseline compliance in place and you're not going to put your business at risk for any kind of fines or other types of lawsuits or other things like that. And one thing I always like to share too is these things exist in the world and people can sue you, but you don't operate your business afraid that people will sue you if you do the right things, right? So that's why I really stress making sure that the HR compliance and the admin, that you have those fundamentals, at the very least have a good foundation on that, because that really helps you, one, to not bottleneck yourself from growth. And then, like I said, to protect your business is the main reason they're there. Okay. Now, as you start to grow, there's a couple of levers that we pull in HR that help you to accelerate. And those are what I call the growth enablers. They're organizational levers, and they're also very underutilized parts of HR. And I say that because if you're a big corporation and you've got 5,000, 10,000 employees, you've got all kind of flavors of everything on that I have on this pyramid. But if you're depending on the size of your business, you may or may not have very robust functions that hit on all these areas. But you're going to be, the more you grow, you're going to get into all these areas more. So that next area is HR operations. And that's where all this administration and compliance stuff we're doing here at the bottom, that has just grown and it's just exploded. And it can be volume or it can be complexity or what have you. And we need to just have really good ways to manage all that information. So that's actually this is a very technical role, believe it or not. It's called HRIS, information systems. So these are databases, these are report writers, these are codes and scripts and all kind of really technical things we tend to get in HR operations. But that's where, again, we're looking to basically manage all the stuff that we need to manage on a day-to-day basis or whatever frequency. And we need to do it at a larger scale, or we need maybe even better reporting capabilities or other things like that. That's typically gets more into our HR ops. Now they're starting to call this people ops now. You might hear that term. Okay. Now keep us going here. Business partner, this is my baby. I am an HR business partner through and through, and I love the business partner pathway to things. And so, what is an HR business partner? Is basically we are going to align the business strategy with your people strategy. And the thing I love so much about the business partner part of your business is we're actually like making stuff happen. We're turning it into action. We're figuring out how we make this work. You want to double the size of your organization in the next 2 years. HRBP, that's the acronym for HR Business Partner. We figure out, how am I going to do that? Now, it's probably 4, 5, 6, 7 different things that we'll need to do collectively to hit that goal. But we're the ones that figure out how to get it done, and we're usually the ones turning it into action. So love me some HRBP life. And HRBPs, believe it or not, like we spend about 90% or more of our time with leaders. The higher you're going in this particular pyramid, and most often, the less these roles will interface with employees on a regular basis. So, like HR ops, you definitely have interaction because you're again, you're helping people with employee self-service and different things like that. But HRBP in our next level, the HR strategy, these two roles work, like I said, 90% or more with business leaders, business owners, whoever the decision makers are. And so HR strategy, that's where we're setting the strategic direction and establishing goals. for the people parts of the business. So what we do is, again, whatever you're looking to do in the business, we translate that into the people parts of that that will help you to achieve that goal. So, again, if you're going to double the size of the business, you're going to need people to do that. So we'll translate the growth goal into people related strategies that we'll need. Maybe, for instance, maybe we're going to hire so much, but maybe um, we're going to develop and retrain some of our existing staff to take on some of those roles. And so we're not going to hire everybody new. We're going to retrain and retool our staff for another position, right? So that would be an example of us taking and creating HR strategy. So as you grow, as you continue to operate and mature in your business practices, you'll see different amounts of these come up. All of you will experience the two fundamental levels, the HR admin and compliance, the three levels on top. It just depends on really what your business goals are. Not every business wants to grow to 100-person, 5,000-person organization. You might say, hey, I'm good with 2 or 3. I like my boutique firm, right? Like, and that's fine. But again, you may run into some of the upper levels in later parts of your business as you mature. You start to think about some of the future related items. All right. So let's talk about those phases of the business. And this, again, you will have the slides for this. And this is actually one that folks tend to really like, is it gives you an idea, and it hopefully gives you some peace of mind knowing that you don't have to know everything. We don't know everything. We just know how to navigate the waters when things arise, right? So like if you bring a problem to me and it's HR related, I'm helping to navigate the sea of information and compliance and so forth we need to make a decision. And so as you look at this, hopefully this gives you a little bit of peace of mind knowing that you don't need to be everything HR, especially early stages in your business. And if maybe your business stays that boutique, you might not need some of these things that are in some of the more later or advanced or mature stages of HR. But again, at the very fundamental, everybody needs the compliance. And that, if you're in a build phase, you're looking at that fundamental HR, the compliance admin. We want to be able to set your foundation so that you can scale quickly if you have to, making sure that your hiring procedures are in place. You know what data and record keeping requirements you have, because there's things like we have like retention schedules. So like you have to keep certain information for a certain amount of time, and there's certain ways you have to keep it like accessible, either like I used to be back in the day under lock and key, in the file cabinet. It's not so much anymore. They just say, again, you have to have the right security procedures in place to protect people's information, right? So having those things is definitely where I would always recommend you focus, especially for your first couple of years. Now, if you take off and you start getting into run and grow phases pretty quick, again, those are where we get into more the run phases where we're starting to operationalize HR. Like I talked about, that people ops and that HR ops is really kind of like, how do we handle all this HR stuff that's happening all the time? We need some way to manage it better so it doesn't, Calgon take me away, since it doesn't like, drive you crazy. And then, like I said, a lot of it is really driven too by data reporting, because we want to be able to have data to make informed decisions about our people practices, but there are also compliance items that require us to keep certain data as well. So we need to have good systems to access that. If we put a good foundational system in for you, it's very easy for me to scale and add as we grow. If you don't have good foundational systems and you get a government contract that requires you to have an affirmative action hiring plan, and you need, and you don't have that data and you've never done it before, then, again, it's going to take 5 times the work to get it done versus setting up at least the foundation that I could build on to get it done in half the time, right? As an example. Now, as you grow, that is where you start getting more into leadership development, continuous improvement. We may be looking at incentive comp, performance management. And when I say sunset and decline, that's more your mature phases. You might want to think about things like succession planning. And maybe there are, I've had situations where the businesses have just decided they want to sell, over a period of time, and they want to transition to a new owner, right? Like, so there's whatever's going on in your business. Again, just with those phases of your business is generally how we like to carve things out. So again, for you, depending on where you're at, some more mature in their business than others, don't be afraid. Again, you don't have to have everything HR right away. Some things, and then the other important thing I think out of this to remember is HR builds, and that's I think another important message here is I can't get you I wouldn't get you an incentive compensation program without having some basic comp- compensation philosophy in place. Okay, so like my basic compensation philosophy tells me how I'm going to make compensation decisions in that organization. Incentive compensation is just one type of that. So it's I call it hustle backwards, right? But it's like working backwards when you do it that way. So if you allow me to at least put in some foundational compensation practices, when you're ready to expand on that and put in incentive comp, then I can just attach it to what we have and modify it as needed. But if you don't have that foundation and you try to put incentive comp in, I'm missing the building block that I need to really make that a great program. So hopefully that gives you some context. And I think that might in the next couple slides I have for you too. And this, I want to talk to you a little bit about hiring HR, because this is where I tend to come in quite a bit as well. So in HR world, we have generalists, and I'm just going to put this up here. We have generalists and we have specialists. So our generalist range of skills, day-to-day support, they're oftentimes employee facing. So a lot of times the person who's your generalist is where the employees go, like, oh, I forgot the number for my health insurance, and all these kinds of things like that, or payroll questions, things like that. They're also a leader resource. You tend to see generalists in smaller to mid-sized companies. And again, when you get into bigger corporations, it's a slightly different. Usually, you'll see a slightly different structure. It will become more specialist in larger corporations. So on the specialist side, those are I've become more of a specialist. I started earlier in my career as a generalist and have moved to specialist. There are people that spend 20, 30, 40 years as generalists and they're solid. And so it's not a necessarily, it's really, again, it has to do more about what does your business need versus the person themselves. And so the specialists, we have specialized skills. We're usually consultants. We work a lot on the tactical and the strategic, like I talked about, how we make it real, make it happen, put the action in place. So it's bringing those two things together. Most times your specialists work mostly with the leaders than they do with the employees. And you see us in all size businesses, from small to large. And I put a note here of builders and doers, because this is really important for you as you're thinking about hiring the right person. Builders build, doers do. Okay, that's the easiest way I can say it. You can, if you make a builder be a doer, they're gonna get bored. Okay, if you're gonna try to make a doer a builder, you won't get anything built. So that's why I say HR is a function, not a person, is because there are sometimes you need more than one person depending on what you're looking to achieve. So I'll use myself as example. I'm a specialist. I am a builder. I build. I put things in that don't exist. I make something out of nothing. I create the strategy, the vision, the direction, the action. Then what I do is I turn it over to a generalist or HR manager or somebody that's a doer and who's going to do the work. And then I go off and I build at the next company and the next company and the next company, right? So you want to make sure you have the right person doing the right thing. Most times what I see is they'll take a really good doer and they'll try to make them a builder, and that does not work. You're going to stress that person out and they don't have that thought process to build. and then again, conversely, if you have somebody who's a builder mindset, they're not gonna last very long. Like I said, they'll get bored, and that's why I'm a builder, and that's why I've migrated to that in my career, because I realize that about myself. I like to build, and that's the best, I think, avenue for me. So here's couple pitfalls to just be mindful of as you are finding your HR partner. Again, one of the common pitfalls is thinking about HR as admin only. And that's why I started off by saying, do not think about HR like an employee. You need to think about HR like I'm a business owner, and the things that I need to think about related to my people are very important decisions about pay, benefits, working conditions, strategy. Like all these things come together. So you're in a whole different mindset than what you see as an employee. The employees only see admin. You're going to be involved in strategy. You're going to be involved in forecasting, workforce planning, all these different things that we're bringing to you as the builders, right? The other is a lot of times and this is my founders, they very, very, very much underestimate the volume and complexity of HR needs. That goes into what I was just saying before is our way of accomplishing things is through a build process. So I need foundations in place in order to build on them. And a lot of times I'll have somebody like, oh, like my client, oh no, don't do the handbook, just hold that off because we don't really need that right now. And then everything that's coming up would have been covered in the handbook, right? So just kind of using that as the example. I call it nickel and diming HR. So, oh, just don't, I don't want to pay the retainer. I just want to pay you by the hour, right? Like, again, I'm laughing a little bit, but honestly and truthfully, that's not a very effective way for us to work in putting your HR practice in place, because there's so many nuances and ins and outs. Excuse me. Hourly is, I don't find, to be a very good measure of output, because a lot of what I'm having to do is, again, just research and make sure that I'm scanning everything and auditing to make sure I have the right things for your company. So there's no HR off the shelf that I just, again, put in place. I have to very much go through everything and customize it. So I typically recommend that you get, when I say a partner, find somebody that you're going to work with on a regular basis. You may not need them full time every month, part time every month. That's why we work fractional or project related, but get somebody to stay with you over that duration and use them consistently, whatever consistently means for your business. And so, like I said, I have customers now that I've had for 5 years, and I might do things for them 3, 4, 5 times a year. You know what I mean? It just depends on what's going on. But don't try to piecemeal or nickel and dime HR, because that what ends up happening there is that's when people end up getting, and they hire a generalist, because a generalists are generally cheaper in, salary than a specialist. And so they'll think they're saving, but then they're actually creating so many more issues that they weren't aware of. Another pitfall for ya is, again, seeing HR through the eyes of an employee. You are a leader, you are a business owner. This is your money. These are your people. And you want to make sure that you go into it with that lens to participate in those conversations and decisions. And, don't look at it like, oh, I don't want nothing to do with that. Just HR person, go run my HR and just be done with it. Don't be blind. Don't put your blinders on, but also you don't need to micromanage HR either, which is one of my points here. Again, just I'll put that here. Uh, don't micromanage your HR partner, because, like, and again, what I say is it's the reason why I say that is I'm trying to help put something in place, whether it's a build or I'm trying to navigate through a complex manner. I have to be able to, I got to be able to get in and do what I got to do, and not have someone trying to handcuff me. And I'll give you an example here. HR, a lot of times we work very, very close with finance. So whoever's your CFO, your finance person, controller, whatever they happen to be, we're like cousins, like we're cousins from the first cousins is HR and finance. And so I was working with a client and we got to a point with some budgeting, and I needed to know how that particular finance person was forecasting something so that I could give them the right information. And the client, I said, well, why don't you just grab the finance person? We could jump on for like 5 or 10 minutes, and I can ask them a couple questions. And they were like, no, no, I'll relay your questions to them. Okay. Now, what ended up happening? We burned 3 weeks of this back and forth because my client did not know how to articulate what I was trying to ask to this finance person. So we're back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Instead of just jumping on the call, 5, 10 minutes, I could have explained what I needed and we could have knocked it out. Right. So that's why I say don't try to micromanage your HR partner. And that's why I say that I recommend you get somebody that you're going to have on a regular basis, because then that way you're not like, oh, well, I can only do 2 hours this week. And then you're handcuffing what that person can really do for you. And you are getting into some of that micromanagement. And I'd be very candid with you. You're probably, if you do work that way, you will lose good people. Because again, and it's not that no one, we're being secretive about what we do or anything like that. It's just that the way we work, we have to be able to navigate in the way we need to make the right decisions. And oftentimes, when that happens, it's very difficult to do your job. All right, guys. So I'm going to just round us out here with some resources. And again, you'll have access to these slides. But these are my resources that I go to all of the time. So when it relates to any sort of labor laws that I need to keep up with, like I said earlier, the Department of Labor is my go-to. I have that flagged. I support all of US, so I'm always into the State Department of Labor. And I'll show you another trick. If you have a payroll or HRIS system, a lot of them have different tools you can use as well. But if you ever need to look anything up or you need to see what's going on, those are the two best resources there. I do have a couple of friends I've gained over the years that are attorneys because we're also like cousins in the organizational structure. And so I do have a couple of law firms that I keep up with, and a lot of them have newsletters. And honestly, that's how I get a lot of my updates, because they'll have newsletters, they'll have trainings, they'll have continuing ed symposiums and different things I can attend. So I sign up for those so that I can get those alerts. And then I usually attend maybe 1 or 2 a year, see what's going on. As it relates to compensation and pay practices, a couple things that I really like. SHRM, it's called the Society of Human Resource Management. That's an organization that a lot of us belong to that are practitioners of HR. I really like SHRM for templates, like basic policy templates, basic, job descriptions, anything that you need I call it basic and foundational that you can edit. I think they've got a really great repository there. Now you do have to be a member. It's usually a couple, like $200 a year or more if you have more people, but not that much. World of Work is also a membership. Now all of these have like free newsletters and things too. So like I said, sometimes you can get by with just getting those updates. But World of Work is another. They do a lot of compensation, total rewards, and engagement benchmarking. So they're really good. And ONET is free. That is also through the Department of Labor. Actually, I think it's the Bureau of Labor Statistics that runs that. But that's all federal government validated data that you can use for job descriptions, salary ranges, etc. I love ONET. ONET also has great resources on, like, it'll tell you for certain professions, well, what education is needed for that particular profession, if there's certifications that you can get. They'll even tell you what the outlook is for that position as it relates to forecasting labor. So certain skills, I can go out and do research and be like, oh, okay, well, soldering. Okay, well, soldering's a hot skill now because we have a gap, but the 5-year projection for soldering is it's going to stay pretty flat, right? So they're not projecting a ton of growth needing people to solder. It's going to stay pretty flat for the next 5 years. I'm just making that up, but those are just some really great things that ONET has, and you can. Oh, I really like that. And another one I didn't put on here is called Career One Stop. Career One Stop also has a lot of the same things that ONET has, but it kind of packages up a little bit different. And then the last thing I recommend is if you have a payroll provider, they all have some sort of options for you to keep up with compliance. And most of them, if there's something that's in payroll that you need to comply with, they're going to automatically keep you in the loop, which is why you're paying them. And there's also, you have to think about not just pay, but you have to think about taxes and filing. And there's a lot of things you have to file taxes and things like that on the payroll side. So I always recommend get a good payroll partner. One of my clients uses Gusto, and I've actually done a little bit of deep dive into that here in the last couple of months. I actually really like Gusto because within their payroll system, we bought, I should say, the extra module that has their compliance. So I have all the locations for all of their, for the company in there, and it will automatically pull a compliance profile for me of those states. So we have like 6 states that we're in right now, and it'll give me an update and say, hey, your California employees need to get their annual harassment training update. Like it'll give you alerts and things to operate off of, which I really like, by the way. But these are really great too. Even if you don't have like ADP, I don't have any of my clients on ADP right now, but I like to go to the ADP site because they have really great tools and resources and information. All of them, I do believe, have pretty good, if not very good, information if you need to look some things up. But obviously, they do that because they want you to have the relationship with them and pay them for your services. So, again, if you have a few of these things, you just keep them on hand, you keep them flagged, and we go to our toolbox and use the tools we need when we need them, right? So that's what I have for you here today. So first of all, thank
Dina,
you very much.
Dina, we have a couple questions.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. So Victoria, she wants to make sure she's understanding the difference between the generalist and a specialist.
Mhm.
And she gives an example. She says a specialist is more so some who would help me build a calendar, apps, organizer, etc. And a generalist would be someone who would help self navigate, train me on how to use the systems. Is she getting that correct?
Okay, let me try to translate that.
Mhm.
So if I say I have a company that wants to put in a performance management system, that's okay, like how are we going to do performance reviews and what kind of feedback and how often is this going to work and is this going to go through a system, et cetera, et cetera. So the way that would work with a specialist versus a generalist, I'm just going to use myself because I'm the builder. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to create the whole system, meaning, oh, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we'll tie it to goal setting. Here's the, questions that we're going to ask. Here's the ratings we're going to use. Like I would come in and create that strategy. And then once that strategy and whatever system, I'll say technology we've decided, we choose and we implement, then I would turn it over to a generalist to go ahead and execute, meaning put it in place. Hopefully that gives you an example. Does that
I
help?
think that's a great example. Yeah. And now we have a question from Sandra.
Hi,
She's,
Sandra. Thank you.
can you make recommend? No, I'm not sure you can do this, but can you make recommendations for attorneys who have newsletters and or training?
You know what? Oh, I can't give you specific names, but I can give you guidance. Look for somebody who practices employment law and make sure they practice employment law in your state. If you do that, you should be fine. Don't get your probate law attorney to look over things. That you really want a good attorney, employment lawyer, employment attorney that works in your state. If you've got those two, you're good.
Okay. I think those are the questions that we have. Boy, this was an excellent presentation. I learned so much myself. I did work in HR as in what we were called information systems at the time. So I would have been
Yeah.
a generalist, right? And
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah,
Mhm.
like I said, we need everybody on the team. So, I don't tell anybody that they're just a generalist or just we need everybody on the team because, like I said, I have some great people that work with me that I have for years. They are the best doers. And I know I can put my blinders on and I can say, look, I know that person's going to get it done. They're going to ask the right questions. They're going to, make sure things are followed up and follow through. I know that's the area where I'm going to start. Like I said, I'm going to get bored. So, there's room for us all. And, again, just finding the right partner because what I have with my clients, if there's an area that I don't operate in as often, I have partners. I bring them in. Like, of course, I've got attorney partners. I have some compensation partners when I do like executive comp. I have survey partners when I need to get into deep engagement surveys. So, a lot of times we can help connect you to the right expertise and also find somebody that's also able to calibrate their offerings to your business because like I said, I'm a small to large business provider, but there are some people that really focus on the large providers and they're going to operate very different. So we all can help you to bring in other team members as well. But thank you so much. Appreciate everyone. And happy Chinese New Year. It's the horse fire year.
Oh
Okay.
dear.
So
Okay.
a lot of action.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, thank you, Dina, and thank you all for attending. And we'll see you at the next webinar. Bye-bye.
That's great, guys. Take care.